Hi, my name is Ilya Zlotnik, advisor and partner with Vivaldi Capital Management and your host to Journeys to the Summit. And welcome to today's conversation with Craig Lemoine, the Director of Financial Planning at University of Illinois. Craig, it's so wonderful to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I know I've had you on my podcast a couple of times, so thank you for having me.
I was going to mention that I've been on your podcast. We talked about so many wide-ranging topics within the wonderful world of wealth management. Very bullish on where we're headed. From the space perspective, Vivaldi's grown tremendously, and there's a lot of aspects that lead to being successful within this business. But one of the most critical aspects is hiring great talent and the next generation. You've been so critical in that function and the work that you do, and being able to bring such talented people to the market. Vivaldi alone is half a dozen folks from your program, whether they started as interns, first year right out of college, or a few years after college, they're in roles like recently one got promoted to being an advisor and a partner.
I love to hear that,
which is amazing.
That is great.
Senior associates, junior associates, operations, client service. So thanks for the great work that you do.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to hear that from you and from our professional team, right? It gives us a little extra breath in the sails and keeps us moving forward. I want to thank you for our relationship means a lot. Vivaldi's been at our career fairs the last, I would say, 4 or 5, 6 years. It's been a longtime partner of what we do, and that always helps us motivate the world around us. And our undergraduate program in financial planning, wouldn't be the same without firms like yours walking up and saying, hey, we want to work together, and we're going to hire your students. And it really gives us a good balance of kind of preparing people for the marketplace, and at the same time kind of knowing that we're on track or not on track, or we can get more on track.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful symbiotic relationship. And I'll give a few shout outs. I know that recently Mackenzie Granby and then Aurora were at your campus. Mackenzie's been on my team for, I think, going on 7 years.
Yeah.
And she's done such a wonderful job within our team, but also going on recruiting and spreading the word.
She's got some talent, no question about that.
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's jump into your story. Sure. What did you study in undergrad, and what initially prompted you to go down the path of financial planning?
Sure. So I will say, my path is a fun one. I'm not a great student, but I'm a really good test taker. Okay. So keep that in mind. It kind of shapes the whole conversation we're about to have. I started college at Texas Tech University in the 90s, which was a really fun time to be at Tech because, you didn't necessarily have cell phones, right? So all the crazy just stays in your memory, right? There's no documenting anything. It was a great time to be a college student. And I started in high school. I remember doing physics and calculus and those things that you do. And so when I got to Tech, I was like, well, I'm pretty good at this. And so I went ahead and majored in physics. So I started in Texas Tech in physics. And I will never forget coming home the first semester of my freshman year, and I had just taken a final exam where I had to calculate the rate of flow of a liquid of a certain viscosity out of a cylinder at a certain height. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And I had to calculate this rate of flow, and that was the final. And I remember I went home and I was good friends with triplets in El Paso, and Stephanie, Katie, and Mike, and great friends of mine. Even to this day, we keep up. And their dad, Ruben, was a financial planner. I remember he would always host these big gatherings at his house. And so I got invited to it, and we were all there, and we're sitting around Christmas, and I'm talking about this final that I had taken. And Ruben kind of looks at me and is like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I never really thought about it, right? I never really thought, what are you going to do with that? And he was like, you really like people. You really like to be engaged, and you're really, charismatic. And I think physics is a waste on you. And he was like, why don't you this summer come out and shadow with me for a week or two, see if you like what I'm doing. So I go back to Tech, and I go back in the second semester of physics. And then that summer I work with Ruben in El Paso. And I just was like, wow, you can do this? This is a career? And I go back to Tech as a sophomore, and I remember I was holding my trombone because I was in the band, right? So it's like in a case. I was holding my trombone. And my advisor was like, yeah, they've got this financial planning program. It just started at Texas Tech. You go talk to this guy, Bill Gustafson. And so I go and I find this guy, Bill. He's this larger-than-life West Texas character. 10 minutes later, I was a financial planning student,
Wow.
So like the rest is history. It was one of those moments of like one person making that kind of impact and change and being like, I don't think your future is a physics guy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I probably got out before the math got really hard. I mean, to be fair, right?
Yeah.
But that's how I got into this. And that was kind of my undergrad experience. And so I graduated with a degree in it was called Family Financial Planning at the time. Since then, it's changed a few names. Yeah, and I got my undergrad in 98. So it's kind of my journey through college.
Wow. Yeah, it is kind of remarkable to think how certain people that are older than you and have seen life play out can see a different vision
Yeah,
for you
absolutely.
than you can for yourself. What was your first job out of college?
So my first job out of college was at a who is currently Money Guide.
Okay.
At the time, they were called Pi Technologies. Plan, invest, enjoy. Clever
Okay.
name.
Yeah.
And there was a stake of that company owned by Harold Avinsky and Dina Katz, who are kind of legendary in the REA financial planning space.
Mm-hmm.
And I had known them through Texas Tech. And so it kind of was this fit of kind of I had good quant skills and they were looking for somebody with that. And so I wound up there in that situation. And I wound up working at this financial planning software firm, like right around 2000, right?
Okay.
Like when everything was worried about Y2K and all that.
Yeah.
And I would do everything from kind of validate some of their modeling around distributions, rollovers, those things, disability coverage. I think to this day, what I've written on buy-sell insurance is still in it like 30 years later.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I think I did well with that.
That's like the early iteration.
The early iteration of fintech, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And then about a year and a half, and then I had an opportunity in Dallas, Texas, and to work in a financial planning team. And
Is that
so
Lincoln
I went over-
Financial?
It was Lincoln Financial, and then they also went by SageMark for their high net worth group. But yeah,
Okay. So I want to talk about that.
Sure.
One thing that I want to mention, I'll talk a little bit about my experience when I first entered the world of wealth management. I didn't realize that I was going to do financial planning or wealth management when I graduated. I had a finance degree. I was interviewing, mostly were sales jobs that I was interviewing at. And one person that I ended up connecting with at Ameriprise Financial brought me into the fold. And one theme that I want to touch on throughout our conversation today is how much the wealth management world has changed for people that are entering it between where it was decades ago, kind of maybe closer to when you started and towards the tail end of when I started, where it was really sales oriented, to now really becoming a real career that people can plan for. And why that's so important is when I entered, they gave me great sales training, which I've carried forward, and I just happen to have a knack for sales. I love it. But I had to learn a lot of the planning and the wealth management on my own, and there's just such a high failure rate within that model. Nowadays, you can enter as an intern. You don't ever have to do sales. You can just focus on planning, operations, client service, whatever you want, right?
Sure.
So let's keep that as a theme throughout. But what was your experience like at Lincoln?
So I started on a team, and they called it the financial planning team. And so they kind of had 3 of us in the back, and literally a windowless office, which was a step backwards because at the software company, I was like,
you had a window.
I had a window and a lake, and it was like really pretty. And I think they had more space than they needed, but anyway. So I wound up working on plans all day long. And I think in the scope of a year, we would easily, without exaggerating, probably our team would do 400 or 500 financial plans, right, in a year. And you get really good at it. Okay. You get good at the analytics, and then they would bring you in after a while as like the nerd in the back, like the Sheldon Cooper, right?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, here's Craig. He's this expert in the stock options. And to be fair, after you do it enough, you do get really good at that kind of thing. So I think what I developed in that part of my career was 2 things. Number one, I got really good quantitatively in the financial planning wealth space, right? Like as far as being able to model, being able to design, taking a look at inputs, assumptions, outputs, all those things, math, et cetera. I got pretty good at it. But the second thing I realized was, okay, the advisors in the model where I worked, their job was shaking hands and bringing in business. And then our team's job was to actually do the planning and occasionally then present that planning, to the implementation and sale of a product. So I kind of also realized at that moment I got pretty good at explaining technical topics to advisors and salespeople, right?
Okay.
And this is really the first time in my career, I would say late 20s, that I realized that I had a knack for explaining things to sales force folks that maybe they didn't get, right?
Yeah.
And I got pretty good at diagrams and mapping, and so as the years go by, I did this for 2 or 3 years. You get pretty good at it,
Yeah.
and then we reached a point where they kind of transitioned how that team worked. And so I wound up then an agent in my own right, on a GDC sales
going out trying to
contract,
build your
right? Where
business.
you had to get X production in a year.
There was a grid.
There was a grid.
Yeah, I remember the grid.
And then back then you got bigger commissions on proprietary products and non-proprietary, right? So we're like all selling Delaware funds because that was like the Lincoln fund, right? And so you got extra points on that. But I just remember those couple of years there of just doing volume work and then being able to sit down with advisors, kind of explain what you did.
Yeah.
So they didn't look like morons in front of the clients. Like that was important to understand the business, all that side. But to your point on sales, right? You're on a GDC contract, then they're like, okay, and this is, it's been inflation adjusted since then, but to go back in time, I remember mine was like 80,000. I'm like, all right, you got to hit 80,000 of gross dealer concessions this year. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you made 80,000. It just means that you earned that much of GDC hitting the grid. And then, you get there and then the next year they're like, oh man, you did so good. You got to get 100. And you're like, oh, I see what this is.
Yeah.
This is a sales culture where they really want the successful people to make their way up to the top. And so they're kind of, getting people out as they go. But it was a great experience for me. I think that being in the planning department, being an agent, helped me really get a lot of skills down before I was 30 that I think maybe at the time was sort of unique.
Yeah. You mentioned the brokerage model, and I started within that world too, Ameriprise Financial, where you got to incentivize to push certain types of investments that you might get compensated more than others. Mm-hmm. And what that taught me was when I went over the other world, the good side, is like how humans can, even if they don't want to do that or they want to do the best things for their client, when there's misalignment of comp structure with the client's best interest in mind, how that could push you to do the wrong things.
I mean, and we teach that in Illinois. One of the things when you get into things like alts and real estate, you have older school compensation structures attached to those, right? So if I want to put real estate in your portfolio, right, the options I have are vast. I can do an ETF. I can actually be a limited partner in a direct investment. I could, if I had enough capital, buy an apartment building on the corner, right, directly. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of ways to put that asset class in your portfolio. One of them being private REITs. Mm-hmm. Now, private REITs, unlike public REITs, I'm not entirely sure our audience, but private REITs is more like a share mutual fund where there's redemption with the company. Yeah. And the company sort of determines how much they're going to issue the shares for and redeem the shares for, and it may or may not be correlated with the performance of the underlying investment, right? Yeah. As the 2008 crisis taught us, private REITs can be very liquid. But private REITs also carry a very high commission when contrasted to other things. Mm-hmm. So when we're in the classroom, what we talk about is a little bit about, okay, you've got this client and it's $1 million and you decide 10% should be in real estate. And so how are you going to invest this? And we do get into this compensation talk, right? Yeah. As if I take that 100,000 and I put it in a private REIT, that's 10 grand. That's a $10,000 commission. Yeah. That's more than I'm going to make on the other $900,000 if I put it in an AUM model, right? Yeah. And so the incentive when you're young and when you're hungry, and if you got kids and you got a family, the incentive is there to sell that stuff. Yep. And so it's you talk about it being human, but I definitely think incentives come into play, right? Because the RIA space might say, let's take that $1 million, let's put it in an AUM model, and that's just going to be what we do with it. Yeah. But in the commission world, that $1 million could generate quite a bit more money for that young advisor. And so
upfront at least,
sure.
Not long term.
Not long term, but upfront. And if you're thinking I got to hit the GDC target, you're not thinking long term.
That's true.
So incentives do, that's how we teach that though. And I think not having that experience, I wouldn't be able to have that happen.
Yeah, incentives matter. I'm so glad that you're teaching that. I'm so glad that I'm on the wealth management independent RIA side, because you have much fewer conflicts of interest. I will say that when I started, the REIT space did have issues. Like you had like
Sure.
these inland products that you have to pay the clients would pay 10% commissions on. The world's changed. We do use private REITs
Yes.
now, and they fit really well within the
Sure.
wealth management model. No brokerage fees.
Well, I think the wealth management model has demanded that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I think just attaching on to one comment, like, what we teach in our program is, so we teach about a suitability standard of care and fiduciary duty. We get into all that. And so it becomes a question like, okay, can I hold a CFP and work at a broker-dealer firm, right? Or work at somewhere that has commission comp? And the answer is sure, you can. It may be a little more challenging for you, but you can. You can certainly be a fiduciary in one of those models. It's just you're going to have to manage more conflicts than someone in an independent model might have to manage, right? So I'd say it's probably harder on somebody to hold that standard in a broker-dealer insurance space where the compensation models can lead you astray.
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean you can't. It just means it's harder to do.
exactly.
And so we kind of teach that as like, yes, you can hold a CFP in all these different spaces,
Yeah,
but it may be more challenging for you when you're hungry and young over here than when you're hungry and young over here.
yeah.
So that's kind of how we teach it.
That's great advice. You were at Lincoln Financial.
Yes.
You were helping a team. You became an agent.
Yes.
In the GDC model.
Mm-hmm. That's fun.
When did you decide to kind of leave that and why, and then go to
So I got I had a professor back at Tech years before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Joe Toombs, fun guy. He calls me up. He's like, Craig, you're gonna grapevine. I was gonna be in Lubbock for something, a football game or whatever. And he's like, you wanna, you're at Lincoln. I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, why don't you come in and teach my insurance class that day? I was like, sure. So I get up and I teach his insurance class, and I realize I'm doing a lot of the diagrams and things I did with the advisors. They're really catching on with the students, right? And so I gave it my all. I gave it 40 minutes of whatever charisma and energy I can bring in a room. And I gave it all I had.
Okay.
And I get done with that. He was like, we're starting a PhD program. I want you to be in it.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. So through Joe, other faculty, and the next thing you know, I got admitted into their doctoral program. And it was new at Texas Tech. They're new. They're financial planning PhD. And I was one of the first ones to be admitted into that. And it was pretty cool, like how that all went down. And so when you get admitted in that kind of program, it's a commitment. And if you can't really live in Dallas and do that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't live in North Dallas and commute to Lubbock. It's just too far. It's like 6 hours. Like it's just not going to work. So I wound up leaving Lincoln and jumping into this doctoral program. And I think, again, you have this pivot moment where somebody sees something in you that you hadn't really seen yourself, right?
Yeah, it's the second time.
And
You
they're
have
like,
an older mentor.
they're like, hey, I think you'd be good at this.
Okay.
And I think he was right. And so I wound up jumping into that doctoral program. And it's kind of fun, as a doctoral student who already has a CFP, you give it, even as a student, you get a ton of consulting opportunities, right? So you have to, advisors like, oh, you work with us. And so in that world, while I was getting my doctorate, I remember I worked with a guy in Lubbock, and I was sort of the wholesaler. I was the buffer. Wholesalers had to get through me to get to him. Oh, they hated that so much. Right?
Yeah.
Because I take him to lunch, and I was like, are you going to get to talk to Jim or not? Like,
Yeah.
really, this is it. Most of them didn't get
Yeah.
to talk to Jim, right?
Yeah.
Anyone that led with returns, like I bounced him right away.
Okay,
I was like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got to do that while I was in grad school. I got to work for a fee-only advisor some. I got to do all sorts of kind of fun stuff while I was in it. And and while you're getting that education, you're also teaching, and then you have these kind of consulting opportunities. And so that was pretty cool how that all came together.
Did you tell me when we were talking offline, was there like a rhyme about Lovelock?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a country song.
Yeah, what's the country song?
It's Lubbock is happiness in my rearview mirror.
Okay, so you eventually left, obviously.
So I eventually leave. And my first job out of college was at the American College, which was a perfect fit, right? Because the American College of Financial Services primarily works with adult learners.
Yeah.
And I'd been teaching, adult agents. So kind of was a good fit. They were at the time more heavy in the insurance space. Since then, they're more well-rounded. They got some brokerage and RIA business too. But at the time, right, when I started there, that was the case. And so, yeah, I started at the American College, and there's another little story that goes with this if you want to hear
Yeah,
it.
that's what we're here for.
So, in PhD land, there's a group called AFS, the Academy of Financial Services, and it's a heavy research-focused group in financial planning, consumer economics, and consumer finance. So, very much heavy focused. And I had gotten a paper published in their proceedings, which isn't that big a deal, but it was cool for me, right? Like I thought it was neat.
Yeah.
And so I present it at this conference. And so imagine in Orlando, you have a conference room about 300-400 people, and it's lunch at the conference, right? And so you got all these people eat lunch, and you've got some vendors like advertising outside of this AFS conference. One of them was the American College, had some of their textbooks and some other graduate materials there that you could learn about. And so I see this older guy with this box, and he's really struggling with this box, and he's walking to the door. And so I get up and I walk up to him, and I was probably early 30s at the time. And I was like, oh, can I help you with that? So I take the box, and it was filled with textbooks.
Okay.
And I walk it to his car, and I put it in his trunk, and then I make one more load with him, helping him clear the table and put it in his trunk. And I'm not making this up. Less than a month later, I get a phone call.
Okay.
And he's like, this is Dr. Walt Warheide, Dean at the American College. We had a sudden opening, and we'd really love if you came up and interviewed for the job.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how did you find me? And he's like, well, you're the one that got up and helped.
Yeah.
No joke.
Amazing.
And so I flew to Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. I interviewed. It went really well. I got the job, and that was my first professor job.
That's wild. It makes me think about like some of the advice I give to younger students or people that are trying to find the next job. It's so much less about resumes.
Yeah.
Sometimes like I want to build my resume.
Yeah.
Like, it's all about networking.
It's
all about building relationships.
It's about networking, and I think there's a touch about hustle, and I think there's just also like how do you distinguish yourself in a room full of people?
Yeah.
How did I distinguish myself in a room full of grad students? I'm the only one that got up and helped.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I'm not saying I'm like the world's biggest helper, but in that moment, right, I stood out from all of the rest of them.
Yeah.
And then when it came time to be on the job market, I didn't ever have to go on the job market because I had this job find me.
Exactly.
Right. Which was pretty cool and completely built on that one action that I took.
What a valuable lesson, which is even so much more valuable in today's world where you just send resumes and AI reads it.
Yeah.
Like how do you stand apart?
You can't stand apart
with that.
You need to have connections and networking and people, and that what makes you stand out. So when I look at our students today, who are the ones competing, right? There's a pretty good network of collegiate opportunities to compete in wealth management and financial planning. There's the Financial Planning Association as a competition. There's a group called the IRFC that has one of the oldest competitions. It's got something like 102 students competing right now.
Yeah.
Which students are burning the midnight oil, working on case studies, working on plans, working on presentations, right? When I look at the best students in our program, it's usually the ones that either led our financial planning club or the ones that compete in those sorts of things. Yeah. And those are the ones I remember. Those are the ones that stand out. Yeah. Like hands down. Or going to conferences, right? Like we just took 4 students to Charles Schwab's Impact event. And you were there. And 26 colleges took 4 students to this event, right?
Yeah.
So that's 104 students that were introduced to 5,000 advisors.
Yeah.
And like, that's how you stand out. You're one of those 104, right? And like, that's how you distinguish yourself.
Yeah. One last point I want to make on this topic is in a world that's going towards AI and digital, there's more and more need and hunger for in-person relationships. Because at the end of the day, we're humans. This is what we want.
We are.
We're sitting in front of a screen and being in front of your computer is still not natural and hopefully never will be fully. So people crave that, and that's what they want, obviously. All right, so you got your first job as a professor. So talk about that, and let's talk about your eventual transition to what you're doing at University of Illinois.
So at the American College, we were and still is. It's a place that's extremely innovative in the online space.
Yeah.
At the time, I would say, without exaggerating, decade ahead of the competitors. I mean, we were doing online classes, 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
You know, like think about that.
Yeah.
Like that's so far before Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Like think about how do you do an online class without Teams or Zoom? But we were doing it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you do that. You do asynchronous, synchronous, and then the world changed a little bit there. You had New York Life, State Farm, Northwestern. So you know what? We want an in-person class. So can you send your faculty out and do these kind of intensives for our companies? And so you would on a Friday or Thursday night, let's say you'd fly to Atlanta, and then Friday you teach a room of maybe 100 State Farm employees and agents. You do the same Saturday, and then Sunday morning you do 20 hours in the classroom, 8, 8, and 4. And at the time, I didn't have any kids, and I was single. I was pretty good at it, so I did a lot of it.
Yeah.
And it paid extra. So the college would be like, hey, we'll give you an extra so many $1,000 if you go do this. Well, over time, I did a lot of that. And it's really fun at first, right?
Yeah.
Because you find yourself right out of grad school, you're making great money, you're making this kind of like intensive review money on top of that, and it's just like really fun. But that journey, the problem there is you get really good at it, you get well known in those spaces, so then you start getting requested. So New York Life would be like, can you send Lemoine? We really want Lemoine, right? So I would do investments, I do their capstone class, I would do insurance, and a fundamental. So there's like, stuff that you do. And again, you're going back to Lincoln, right? You're going back to like, Craig draw a picture good. Like you're going back to this like lifetime of teaching adults.
Yeah.
And so it got to be almost like eating itself a little bit because it's a lot of fun at first. You're making great money. You have the time. But then you meet someone. And then you have kids.
Yeah.
And then you look back and you're like, I've been doing the same thing for 8 years. And I think the crux of it all came together. There was a leadership position at the American College, and I put in for it. I don't think I'll ever forget this. You talk about people having conversations with you, right?
Yeah.
I sat down with the CEO at the time, and he looked me dead in the eye and he goes, you are way too valuable in the classroom to put you in a leadership role.
Wow.
That wouldn't be a good fit for your talents. And I, across the table, said, but I'm just tired of doing the same thing. And he goes, but you're really good. And so I realized at that moment that I needed to leave. And it wasn't because he's a bad guy. I get it. His business model was his business model.
Yeah.
But I think as far as professional growth went, that opportunity wasn't there. And so I started to seek out, well, where could I be in leadership, in financial planning, and academics, which is a pretty narrow Venn diagram, right? And so one thing leads to another, and I connect with Paul Ellinger, who is now in the provost office at Illinois, but at the time he was in the department I work in now. And Paul's like, I've heard about you, I know about you, and you heard good things. And so there were some advisors that were alumni. They go, yeah, Craig guy's pretty good. You talked to him. And so I came and interviewed, and I got the job, and then we've blown their program up.
What year was that?
I started fall of, I want to say 17 or fall of 18. I forget exactly. One of the two.
And how many students were in that program?
When I started, there were 82.
It's a small program.
It was pretty intimate, yeah.
Okay. And how big is it now?
We're at a good 240.
Okay.
So we've about tripled it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's your goal?
I have 200.
Is that kind of your stay at this?
200 is good.
Yeah.
Because the math of higher ed doesn't really lend itself to there's a lot of factors, right?
Yeah.
Like I would rather know the name of 200 awesome students that love financial planning than have 300 or 400 that I can't really help place that aren't as dedicated. And 200, so with the faculty lines we have today, 200 is just fantastic.
Got it.
It's a good number.
All right, so let's talk about what did the program look like when you first joined, and what was your vision for it over the next obviously 7 years or so?
So when I first joined, I guess it was fall of 17. Yeah. When I first joined, there were no electives. It was just you took your core classes and then you did some ag economics and you got your degree. But there wasn't anything like what we have today. And my vision was to create programs that students could come out of with maybe a little more skill in things like psychology, counseling, behavioral finance,
which is
we wanted to blow
at
that up.
least 50% of the business.
At the time I started, they weren't required to take estate planning, which I immediately, I won that at a faculty meeting. I was like, so retirement's required? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, but estate's not. They're like, no. And I go, but everybody dies, but not everybody retires. And they were like, huh. And I was like, so I'm just saying. But so one of the first things I did was advocate for what I felt a curriculum. Our students were taking risk in the business college, which is great, except they weren't teaching long-term care at all.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, we need our own, if that risk class isn't doing what we need done, we need to do our own. you know? So anyway, it was the first few years were a lot of curriculum development, a lot of political advocating, a lot of getting people to help me move things forward. And at the same time, building out some corporate relationships. So we had markets for our students because, before that, the market, it's not that hard to place not 25 students a year, but to get a bigger market, you really needed an advocate. And so I think we did that. Then we built out the faculty. So it's been a sprint, like no question. It's been hard.
Yeah, there's a whole ecosystem around it. One thing I want to mention is it makes me think about kind of the parallel paths that we've been taking since you joined University of Illinois in your position and have been changing that in 2017. Around 2017, I feel like we were still a pretty small firm. And around that time, we've been growing consistently, but we were getting to like an inflection point where we had to start bringing in younger talent to help support the growth of the advisors. And it's been a work in progress, just like anything else. Initially, we didn't have really a great, well thought out plan as to who we're going to bring on. We bring, this person looks smart, they're talented, they're young, they're hungry, they're in finance. Let's bring them on. And one thing I learned about that whole entire experience is that there was a much lower probability of those people sticking around, because when you're in your early 20s, you could be talented, but you don't necessarily know what you want.
No, you don't. Not at all.
And what we learn and what we've been able to change now, and a big part of the way we hire, is we only hire from planning programs now into the advisory business. There's obviously different verticals where we hire from other places, but what that allows us to do is we're bringing people that either already were interns, so we know how they work, but they're ready to sit for their CFP. You're going to talk about how you're going to get people pre-licensed. That's one of your goals, right? But we know that if they spent 4 years dedicated to a planning program, they spent, I don't know how much it costs now to go to University of Illinois, but it's at least $100,000 to $200,000, whether you're in state or out of state. There's a high probability that they're going to be good. And they're going to be dedicated to this business. And then we're just going to give them the opportunities to go in whatever direction they want.
Absolutely.
Within the business. Advisors, partners, associates, whatever.
I'll tell you, I think that one thing about financial planning programs, and we have seen them explode in the last 5 years, the number of students in them, the number of people. This career has traditionally been one of career changers. Right? People get into financial planning from a different career. They get in when they retire, or leave a firm, or they were an engineer, or they were a teacher. And you see lots of people come into planning that way. Traditionally, that was the model to get into this business for decades, right? And now I think you're seeing more and more often younger people going to college with this goal in mind. And that's relatively new. I would say this is probably 15 years old. I don't think before that you really had this type of model.
No.
So you've really seen it explode. I mean, you've seen just in the last 5 years are some very big name schools deciding we want to be in financial planning. We want to be in wealth management. We want CFP programs. And yes, there have been classic CP programs, and there's been steady growth over the last 10 years. I'm not discounting that. But you've just seen a lot of really big schools popping up in the last 5 years with these massive programs. For example, Arizona State has over 400 undergrads in their financial planning program. Like over 400, twice the size of mine. Like that's crazy to me. That's bigger than Texas Tech. That's bigger than Kansas State. That's bigger than all the big names in this like the big schools, like the classic programs. And they're doubling, tripling those, right? And that 400 is going to be 600 the next time you blink your eyes. And so you're seeing colleges catching up to the profession. a little bit. You're seeing a little bit of catch up right now, right? You're seeing bigger dollars, you're seeing bigger schools, you're seeing programs come into play that in the past would have been, those students probably would have gone into finance or accounting. And now some of those students are saying, oh, this wealth space, this financial planning, RAA space, is viable paths for my future. And you're seeing colleges get on board with that.
Yeah, it probably parallels the transition within the space from sales-oriented to career. And then, like you said, the academic world is playing catch up. Also, being in wealth management is much more interesting than being in accounting.
Yeah.
I will say that.
But I would also say the partner role is effectively the same, right? You're not going to be a partner in an accounting firm because you're good at accounting.
Yeah.
You're going to be a partner in an accounting firm because you're good at handshakes and bringing in business,
Yeah.
and you're good at retaining business.
That's
And I would say it's the same in wealth. So yes, different underlying skill set, but fundamentally those characteristics of who's owning and running things is the same in those two worlds.
That's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the coursework you do. I'm interested, like some of the things that the students are learning that you feel like are super interesting, and how you see that evolving in the future.
So one of the things we've done is let's give you some context of the program and then kind of how we've run with it. We have had, and I have had, incredible luck with a intro to personal finance class. When I got to U of I got handed an intro class, and there were 50 students in this intro to personal finance class.
Yeah.
And it was intro to personal finance, financial planning. There were 50. And I was like, why are there 50? It's an online class. And this is 2017. And they're like, well, yeah, the last person wanted to keep it at 50. And I was like, let's go. So I uncapped it, made it kind of fun, had some real practical exercises in it. And at the time, the guy doing the live class is fantastic. He's a great, great instructor. And he probably had 100 a semester, maybe 200 total. And very quickly I surpassed him. And this year we're going to run 1,600 in that.
Wow.
So the idea then becomes economics. All right. Like, I'm an economics guy. I've got a PhD in consumer economics, environmental design. That was the program I went into. And so I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, I understand that undergraduate tuition dollars fuel a lot of what we can do at Illinois, right? If you imagine Illinois' model is, imagine all the tuition dollars go in a big pot. And then they allocate that pot to colleges based on the percentage of enrollments through the college. So the more undergrads you have, the bigger piece of that pie you get, right? It's kind of the tuition model. And then the colleges divvy it out to departments using the same sort of formula. And then tweak it. Everyone tweaks it, but that's the idea. So if you have a class of 1,600 people, it's very profitable for everybody compared to a class of 50, right?
Okay.
So you run into that model of like, okay, we want to teach personal finance, but we can also do this in a way that empowers and lets us hire new faculty lines and all this stuff, right? So it's great. But then you run into this question of like, all right, so let's say I take this intro class and I really like it, but I'm an engineering major. So I'm not going to switch over, but I'm an engineering major. I really like it. Well, is there something else I can do after? And that is where we have really been able to develop electives that are interesting and important to our majors, just as well as a non-major. So, for example, we have money and happiness.
Okay.
It's one of the highest rated classes right now at Illinois. And money and happiness, if the big personal finance class I'm talking about is called ACE 240, it's called ACE 242. Right? So you just kind of follow it up. Money and happiness is extraordinarily well beloved. It fills up every semester. It's our first study abroad. They're going to Costa Rica this winter. In fact, in a month they're going to go. Is the best classes on campus, right? And it talks about psychology and money and satisfaction and income and what drives happiness, and what a great elective for a financial planner, right?
Yeah.
We have one called Women, Money, and Power, and it looks specifically at, well, the dynamics between women and money, and then what happens at retirement. Because women generally have more pressures on them than men do when it comes to retirement, because caretaking gets thrown on that plate, and we don't really get that. So we study that part of it too, and that's ACE 243. We have Money, Power. We've got Money and Happiness. We added on something called Advanced Personal Finance, where they go in the community and they give personal finance and credit talks to the community. It could be everywhere at the Y, to the library, to a fraternity or sorority. So all of that follows up the personal. But then think of it from a standpoint of going into the field. If you take all three of those and then you graduate with your CFP stuff, right? Like, you're that much more prepared for what's coming than you would have been. So we've built out electives like that. We also added a fintech class. it's not really, it's mostly for majors, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun. We do everything from, you know, Money Guide to, I think, Right Capital, Morningstar, that kind of stuff. So our students come out knowing those tools. And then lastly, I've championed a licensing course. I had a few years ago, I had a talk with some of our friends at Fidelity, and they were like, yeah, we literally take undergrads who have passed a high stakes exam and put them in one pile. And we take people that have not and put them in another pile. And we do not even look at this one until we've gone through the licensing pile.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that just you guys? And so I asked around, and almost everyone asked is like, nah, you give me somebody with a 65, they're less risk.
Yeah.
You give me somebody with an SIE and 63, they're less risk. So we are in the process of making that a requirement. And so you're going to soon see everyone out of our program having taken one or more high stakes exams.
That's great. How many students go to University of Illinois?
Oh my goodness gracious. I don't really know. I think 28,000 to 23,000, 20,000 undergrads, and then maybe another 12. I want to say it's just under 40 all together with doctoral, grad, masters, and undergrad.
I mean, do you turn away a lot of people that try to get into your program, or how does that?
Yeah. So to give you an example, this winter, we have what we call ICT transfer, intercollegiate transfer.
Yeah.
So this winter, we had 20 students want to ICT transfer into planning. And we will not consider them if their essay doesn't talk about wealth management, financial counseling, therapy, or personal finance.
Yeah.
We don't consider that person, right? So immediately 10 of them didn't get in.
Yeah.
Because they were like, I want to get job. And we're like, okay, that's not you. So
Yeah.
of the 20, we threw 10 out just on their essays. The other 10, we took 5, and then the other 5 didn't have the GPA. So 5 out of 20, right?
What's
That's about...
What's a GPA minimum?
We really want you to be... I think we're looking for involvement outside of your courses.
Yeah.
So clubs and fraternity sororities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we've really gotten, like, if you're not in that 3.2, 3.25 range, we don't really even want to look at yet. And that's different than it was when I first got here, and I would take anybody in the quad.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So, like, think about that dynamic of we're at 25% acceptance now. And when we started, I literally would walk up to kids that were in that 240 class and be like, "What, a little more about money?" Like that. Like, I would take anybody. And now 25%, that's pretty good. That's crazy to me how that's gone. And there's a world where we have more faculty lines and we grow to 200 to 300, 400. But, you know, we're at a good spot right now. And to some extent, becoming a little more elite isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to get in to small sample. It makes people like me more excited to partner with you because we know that anybody that comes out of your program, there's extremely high probability they're going to be smart and dedicated to the profession.
Sure.
With experience and licensed. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So personally, what do you see as kind of your future, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a risky question.
Well, we don't have to talk about it.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think I've got 5 more years of this in me.
Okay.
But then I got to do something else.
Okay.
I have taught an online personal finance class to thousands of people one way or another since 2008.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be braggadocious, but imagine doing that for 20 years.
Yeah.
You've taught credit cards for 20 years. You've taught car loans for 20 years. You've taught the basics of finance to thousands of people for 20 years. Now, the flip side of that, you've taught probably 100,000 people of your career, maybe more, right? I've made an impact here.
Yeah.
No question.
No, you made a huge
impact. But I think there's a day where I'm just done teaching about credit cards to freshmen. And I think that day is coming. So does that mean maybe, you know, pursue some fundraising? Do I dive more into other stuff? But, you know, I think I got a good 5 years left. And at some point, I want to be like, I've done this so many times that I think it's time to move to a different role.
Yeah, I mean, that's what keeps things interesting. That'll put you right into your mid-50s. You're turning 50 soon.
I am. In a month from when we're recording
Happy
this.
big 5-0.
Thanks, buddy.
To you. That's a big milestone.
It is. But I think that's where we're at. And then I think the other thing, too, is it's been kind of fun. We've really gotten into the public class space at Illinois, like the public facing.
Yeah.
And the potential for that to explode is pretty big. And I think being an innovator in that space is going to be a lot of fun. So I think that may be 5 years from now if you talk to me. I think that may be what this conversation would be about.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the demand for understanding simple financial.
Yeah, personal finance is hard, and people don't grow up with it.
And they
right?
don't teach that
No,
in
they
high
don't.
school,
And
which actually to me is mind-boggling.
it is.
That they don't teach maybe the most important life skill that you can have.
Well, research tells us that you're most likely to adopt the financial habits of your parents.
Yeah.
And so if your parents sat down with you and talked about credit cards, great. But if they didn't, you didn't get that. You missed it, right?
Yeah.
So most of our personal finance knowledge comes from our parents.
Okay.
And that can be good, but more than not, that isn't great. So there's other ways we can learn about personal finance from there.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave it on 2 thoughts. One, I'm excited to kind of see how that evolves. Obviously, we're going to continue to talk through our relationship with your university. If you ever want somebody to come and talk to students and give back,
Absolutely.
I'd love hanging with them. Maybe we could pick a time sometime in the new year for me to come out.
That'd be fun.
And do that. Pick a topic or a class, and we can do that.
I love it. Well, thanks for having me on.
It was
a lot
wonderful.
of fun.
Yeah, it was great to chat.